Since childhood, I have possessed a visage strikingly similar to that of the eldest daughter of the Sioux family, yet our identities were exchanged just as she was on the cusp of matrimony. The reason was quite simple. It was discovered that she was with child just as she was preparing for her wedding. 3 months later, Sioux Fengwan, with a pallid countenance, wept and implored to have our identities restored. I smiled radiantly and replied, "From whence comes this lowly maid, so eagerly seeking her demise?" 1. I possess a visage strikingly akin to that of the young lady, so much so that even the matron harbors doubts about whether she bore twins. Yet, this resemblance is far from a blessing. It was on a frigid winter's day that the matron stumbled upon me in the servants' quarters. My hands, ravaged by prolonged exposure to icy water whilst laundering, bore the marks of frostbite. My countenance was gaunt, my hair a dull hue, and my lips cracked, oozing blood that congealed into scabs at the corners of my mouth. The matron paused for a moment, then gently took my hand, inquiring if I would care to serve as the young lady's personal maid. Naturally, I acquiesced. Being a personal maid is a position of high esteem, infinitely superior to that of the lowly menial servants. However, I dared not display my elation, instead casting my eyes downward in cautious regard of the matron. With a tender smile, she led me away from the servants' quarters. Thus began my tenure as the most inconspicuous personal maid to Sioux Fengwan, the eldest daughter of the Sioux family. At the time, I remained unaware that my mother was the matron's blood sister, and that I too belonged to the Sioux household as a lady. Upon our first encounter, Sioux Fengwan took an immediate disliking to me, insisting that I veil my face each day, forbidding me from revealing my countenance to anyone. This was simply because she could not bear the thought of her visage being borne by a lowly servant. I was 11 years old, while the young lady was merely 10. 2. I was astounded by the lavish lifestyle of the young lady. After all, I had been accustomed to hardship since childhood, and had no inkling that garments could be so soft, hair so fragrant, and pastries so sweet. A personal maid must possess the skills to style hair and attire, yet how could a coarse servant like myself be expected to manage such tasks? Thus, I endured her scorn and rebuke daily. Should my efforts fall short, I faced corporal punishment. To evade her tirades, I tirelessly learned everything within my reach, gradually becoming her shadow. At 11, I took the blame for her incomplete studies, suffering the sting of 30 lashes. At 12, after she pushed the fourth miss into the lotus pond, I bore the brunt of 30 strikes and knelt in the ancestral hall for 7 days. At 13, enamored with the crown prince, I assisted her in embroidering a handkerchief, which garnered the prince's praise. Upon her return, she punctured my fingers with needles, leaving them bloodied. At 14, I composed a poem for her at the spring banquet, winning the prince's favor, while she beat me mercilessly with a soft whip, leaving me a battered mess. Everyone knew Sioux Fengwan had a taciturn maid who perpetually wore a veil, yet no one was aware that I bore an identical face to hers. Whenever she erred, I donned her garments to absorb the punishment on her behalf. Yet, whenever my abilities surpassed hers, her jealousy ensured that I endured a fair share of suffering. After all, aside from her and the matron, scarcely anyone had glimpsed my visage. I was her maid, her servant, her shadow, and indeed her possession. She wielded the power to dispose of me at will, and I could only endure with gratitude. At 15, she was betrothed by the emperor to a young general from Huaihua, and 2 years later, they wed. Enraged, she shattered objects in her chamber, sending shards flying and leaving a bloody mark on my cheek. I hastily removed my veil, but she berated me, calling me a lowly maid and ordering me to kneel in the snow. It was bitterly cold. Since I turned 11, I had not encountered such a frigid winter. Sioux Fengwan, still unsatisfied, forced me to repeat, "I am forever Sioux Fengwan's most wretched servant. I am forever Sioux Fengwan's most wretched servant." Each utterance echoed in the desolate courtyard, the chilling wind exacerbating the pain of my wounds. In my most dire moment, a young lad perched on the eaves, tilting his head to gaze at me. "Little maid, what are you doing?" Startled, I swiftly covered my mouth, my eyes wide with fear. Realizing the impropriety of his actions, he retrieved a piece of candy from his pocket and tossed it to me. However, Sioux Fengwan, from within the room, barked through the door. "Where is your voice? If you remain silent, I shall make you kneel here for 3 days." I swallowed hard, bowing my head as I continued, "I am forever Sioux Fengwan's most wretched servant." I am forever Su Fengwan's most wretched servant. The young lad on the wall transformed from confusion to anger, ultimately leaping down with his sword drawn. I was terrified by his boldness, wondering which thief possessed such audacity. Fortunately, he halted before reaching the door, turned back, and left a small bag of candy before vaulting over the wall, departing Sue's residence. I stared at the candy on the ground, my mind clouded with confusion. 3. A marriage decree is a marriage decree. It is not easily altered. Despite Su Fengwan's attempts to uproot the Su family with her raucous protests, she could not change her fate. Yet, she seemed deranged, convinced that she would find a way to marry the crown prince and become the revered crown princess. Thus, she set her sights on the spring hunt, a season when even the cats could be heard meowing. The grounds were teeming with nobility and countless young ladies. To be frank, it was far more bustling than the spring banquet. Su Fengwan mounted her horse, but struggled to stay atop. She drew her bow but missed her target. And when she played polo, she fared no better. All the noble ladies laughed at her, teasing her to seek instruction from the Huaihua general stationed at the border. Even the crown prince raised his cup, gazing at her from afar. Infuriated and humiliated, she retreated to her tent, and I followed suit. Su Fengwan's demand was simple. She wanted me to don her attire and redeem her dignity in front of those who had mocked her. I naturally complied, feeling a flicker of solace. Each time I removed my veil to wear Su Fengwan's garments, I experienced true freedom and joy. The 6 arts of the gentleman were lessons I had mastered on her behalf, so archery and equestrianism posed no challenge for me. I quickly became the center of attention, while the disguised Su Fengwan furiously pinched the soft flesh at my waist. The crown prince, having changed into riding attire, approached with a gentle smile, inviting me to venture deeper into the hunting grounds. Su Fengwan, eager to follow, was halted by the prince, who smiled yet bore a cryptic gaze. Sue's maid seems increasingly unaware of her station. You must discipline her well. Thus, Su Fengwan watched as I accompanied the crown prince into the depths of the hunting grounds. For I could not discern whether the crown prince was profound or merely naive. I initially assumed he had ulterior motives in whisking away the eldest daughter of the Su family, but to my surprise, he appeared genuinely enamored with my archery skills. We galloped around the grounds, our quarry accumulating to the point where we could scarcely hold it. As he laughed heartily, a cold arrow suddenly soared through the air, piercing the prince's chest. The subsequent 2 arrows were aimed at me, intent on leaving no survivors. Furrowing my brow, I leaned closer to the prince. And though I dodged the lethal shots, one struck my left leg, and another my right shoulder. The assailant, having released the arrows, fled. I shielded the prince, seeking refuge in a dirt pit for an extended time, and when I finally saw no one around, I helped him mount his horse, directing it towards the camp. The prince coughed up blood, yet managed a weak smile, saying, "The young lady of the Su family need not worry. I am inherently different from others. My heart lies on the right side, and I have a layer of golden thread armor inside. I shall be fine." Pain surged through my leg and shoulder, and my vision began to blur. I bit my tongue to speak. "Your Highness, your well-being is paramount. Conserving your strength is wise." Clad in Su Fengwan's attire, I prepared to impersonate her and fulfill her duties. The crown prince was half leaning behind me when he suddenly spoke. "The Su family cannot even take care of a single lady, allowing such a beautiful visage to bear a scar." My heart jolted with surprise, yet I remained silent, feeling my head grow increasingly heavy as I urged the horse beneath me to hasten towards the camp. Upon catching sight of the colorful banners fluttering at the camp, darkness enveloped me, and I lost consciousness. I awoke once more in a rain-drenched hut. My arms and legs throbbed with pain and were swollen beyond measure, and I was consumed by a feverish heat. I understood all too well that this was the consequence of neglecting my wounds. As I attempted to move, I discovered that my entire body was bound, rendering me utterly immobile. Hearing my struggles, someone outside swiftly opened the door and entered hastily. It was Antimo, a mute peasant woman and a trusted confidant of the matriarch. Upon noticing that I had regained consciousness, she hastily brought a bowl of already cold medicine to my lips. I choked on it, my chest heaving, while her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. After setting down the bowl, she gestured with her hands, urging me to live, go down. I managed to nod vigorously, despite my cracked lips. Sensing my response, she quickly bundled me into a sack and hoisted me onto her shoulder, rushing me outside. Within a short span of time, Animo set me down and removed the head covering. I was in familiar territory, Su Fengwan's chamber. Indeed, there she was, seated on her bed, her calves and arms tightly wrapped, her complexion significantly paler than usual. I understood her plight, yet I marveled at her capacity for self-infliction. Su Fengwan picked up a soft whip from the bedside and struck me repeatedly. She only ceased when fatigue overcame her, and blood began to seep from the bandaged areas of her arms and calves, at which point she began to interrogate me. She sought to know precisely what had transpired during my time with the Crown Prince, demanding a detailed recount of the events of that day. As a mere shadow bound to her will, I recounted everything meticulously, even detailing how I shot down a full-grown stag and the Crown Prince's praises for my equestrian skills. Su Fengwan trembled on the bed, tightly gripping the whip she had used on me. I discerned her jealousy, a wild, consuming envy. Yet, dear Su Fengwan, it was you who repeatedly presented opportunities to me. How could you blame me for seizing them? Naturally, I refrained from revealing that the Crown Prince was aware of the scar on my face. After all, such trivial matters would hardly linger in the mind of His Highness. Su Fengwan would not allow me to perish, nor would she permit me to find joy. The damp environment was ill-suited for recovery, and the medicinal concoctions were perpetually cold. Fortunately, she had removed all the bindings from my body, perhaps believing that a maimed individual could not flourish. The night was cool, and I opened a crack in the window, allowing the silvery moonlight to stream in. A shadow flitted past and stood silently by the window. I couldn't help but chuckle. Is the Su residence truly so permissive of your comings and goings? The shadow pushed open the window, blocking much of the moonlight. And though I could not discern his features, I recognized him as the little thief I had encountered 6 months prior. I have nothing worth stealing here, I croaked. My throat parched. The shadow remained silent, instead vaulting inside and placing a bag of candy on the bedside. As I scrutinized him, I noted the stubble on his chin, the bloodshot eyes, and a chill emanating from his presence. Just as I was about to speak, he pressed a finger against my wound, causing me to stifle a cry. But he did not relent. In a swift motion, he removed all the wrappings from my injuries and applied a salve he had brought, rewrapping them with care. After completing his task, he glanced back at me before disappearing into the night through the window. I retrieved a piece of candy from the bag and placed it on my tongue, savoring its gradual dissolution, filling my mouth with sweetness. It was indeed delightful. How could something so simple bring such joy? Thanks to that little thief, my bedside was often adorned with delicacies from East City, such as peach blossom pastries, soft glutinous rice cakes from the West Market, as well as the braised pork from Juxiang Pavilion and the newly released trinkets and rouge from Meijiao Pavilion. My favorite among them was a simple sandalwood hairpin, intricately carved with a tiny plum blossom. I had always cherished the plum blossom. Injuries to bones and sinews take 100 days to heal, yet Su Fengwan would never allow me the luxury of full recovery. As her wounds healed, she was eager to participate in the poetry gatherings, flower viewing events, polo matches, and throwing contests of the capital. She longed to meet her Crown Prince brother. Following the incident at the hunting ground, the Su family had gained recognition as heroes in the rescue, and Su Fengwan had been bestowed the title of Princess of Liang. The Crown Prince had not lied. He had indeed suffered little injury and had even visited the Su residence several times to see Su Fengwan. When I encountered Su Fengwan again, she was radiant as a peach blossom, her spirit aflame with vitality. I could not deny that her beauty was striking. No, it was our beauty that was truly remarkable. Of course, General Huaihua, who was engaged to her, had also come to visit, returning hastily from the border during the initial days of her injury, only to be summarily dismissed by Su Fengwan. Rumor had it he had drowned his sorrows in drink for many days thereafter. Poor young general, unaware of the vastness of Su Fengwan's ambitions. When Su Fengwan appeared at Shanyang residence, she captivated everyone present. The 16-year-old maiden was enchanting, effortlessly drawing the gaze of all with the mere lift of her hand. Before the Crown Prince arrived, Prince Qing approached her first, presenting her with a vibrantly blooming flower, speaking in a perfectly measured tone. What you desire is not the Crown Prince, but rather the position of Crown Princess, the title of Empress. And only I can make that happen.
Su Fengwan Stephen.
And only after Prince Qing had departed did she tremulously place the recently gifted orchid into her hair. I observed her with a detached gaze as she embarked on the path of her deepest desires. Prince Qing's words hung like a curse. Within 3 days, the crown prince fell out of favor with the emperor, and officials jointly petitioned for his dethronement. Su Fengwan paced restlessly in her chamber, a blend of excitement and apprehension. 7 days later, she finally met with Prince Qing. The prince, Zhao Yuan, had become the current crown prince. Su Fengwan transformed back into a carefree, joyful girl, blissfully unaware of her impending marriage. Zhao Yuan's affections for her beauty surpassed his admiration for her intellect, a sentiment that provided Su Fengwan with immense comfort. Not only did he gain Su Fengwan's support, but also that of the Su family. Yet, her joy blinded her to the approaching wedding date. Another spring arrived, bringing with it blooming flowers, yet Su Fengwan was filled with trepidation. The begonia drooped under the weight of its blossoms, and bees stealthily tucked away autumn's fruits within the petals. I was not the only one aware that her monthly cycle had yet to arrive. Both the matriarch and Zhao Yuan were privy to this fact, while the naive Su family patriarch remained oblivious, believing his daughter to be an untouched flower. Su Fengwan arranged to meet Zhao Yuan, tearfully revealing everything. Zhao Yuan embraced her tenderly, stroking her hair with a tone filled with regret. "Wanner, I have only just ascended to the throne as crown prince. If I propose to you now, our reputations would surely be tarnished." Su Fengwan nestled closer to him, playfully asking, "But this is our child. Can you truly bear to let it go?" I stood silently by, listening to their empty declarations of affection. Zhao Yuan gently lifted Su Fengwan, saying, "Wanner, you must remember, we are striving for our future. I, too, eagerly anticipate the arrival of our child. However, with Ling Anping having repelled the barbarians 30 miles away during the 10th month, we cannot afford to offend him at this juncture." Ling Anping is indeed the name of that young general. I never anticipated he would wield such formidable prowess. Su Fengwan was momentarily taken aback, then inquired, "Are you suggesting that I am still to marry Ling Anping?" The atmosphere within the room instantly thickened, as Su Fengwan fixed a stiff gaze upon Zhao Yuan. While Zhao Yuan continued to sigh, Su Fengwan suddenly rose and removed the veil from my face. My eyelashes fluttered, and I cast my gaze downward, fixating on the ground. After a prolonged silence, Su Fengwan tearfully said, "I am aware of your grand ambitions, but in this life, I wish to be with you alone. This is my personal maid, who bears an uncanny resemblance to me. She has always been the most obedient during our time together in the boudoir." Seeing Zhao Yuan still hesitating, Su Fengwan pressed on, "If I were truly to marry Ling Anping, do you think my father would still offer you his support? Once our grand endeavor is achieved, I shall reappear, presenting her as my elder sister by virtue of affection." To marry the elder sister of the Empress would hardly be a slight against General Ling. Persuaded by Su Fengwan's words, Zhao Yuan waved his hand, allowing her to decide for herself. I obediently knelt, bowing deeply. "Thank you, Miss Su, for bestowing this marriage upon me. Thank you, Su Fengwan, for choosing to tread this path toward the abyss." Su Fengwan scoffed, "You ought to be grateful for your face." With merely 2 months until the wedding, time was too tight, necessitating a simplification of arrangements. Though it was said to be a simplification, the truth was that as a maid, the mistress was reluctant to expend too much effort. The bride price sent by Ling Anping was significantly reduced by the mistress, and a couple of neglected estates were hastily included as my dowry. I picked a piece of candy from a bag by the window, slowly savoring it as I meticulously crafted my wedding attire. A sense of unprecedented tranquility and peace unfurled within me. On the 25th of July, it was the day Ling Anping would come to collect his bride. The Su residence bore no notable difference from any other day, save for a few red lanterns and strips of crimson silk. To persuade the head of the Su family, Su Fengwan brought me before the Grand Secretary, crying and pleading fervently. Thus, the current lackluster state was well understood by the head of the Su family. Reflecting on this, I couldn't help but smirk. I had not taken much from the Su residence, only a mismatched wooden hairpin adorning my head. The cacophony of firecrackers, the vibrant red wedding robe, the sturdy sedan chair, and the jovial crowd gradually distanced me from the coldness of the Su household. I clutched an apple tightly in my hand, yet tears streamed from my eyes. This place that had confined me for 17 years was one I vowed never to return to. Dizzily completing the intricate rituals, I was assisted into the bridal chamber. I took a shallow breath. Since the encampment, I had not experienced such tumultuous emotions. Outside, the revelry continued, and as dusk approached, Ling Anping dismissed those raucous soldiers who sought to disrupt the bridal chamber and staggered into the room. I tightened my grip on my garment, but his large hands enveloped mine. The joyful scale slowly ventured forth, lifting the red veil that covered my head. I beheld a youth with a flushed face. His features were sharply defined, and though his brows were robust, his eyes held a tenderness. His thin lips were pressed together, as if stifling his emotions, and the bright red wedding robe clung to his tall and sturdy frame with an unexpected elegance. He gazed back at me, albeit with a hint of nervousness, guiding me to sit at the table where we were to partake in the wine ceremony, inviting me to join him in a toast. I offered a soft smile, extending my arm to intertwine with his. It felt as though we were binding our lives together in an unbreakable embrace. I cannot recall what transpired next, only that a gentle sensation lingered on my lips. It was reminiscent of the refreshing sweetness of peach blossom pastries from the East City, the fragrant stickiness of glutinous rice cakes from the West Market, the tender richness of soy-braised pork from the Gathering Fragrance Pavilion, and the sweetness of the candy melting in my mouth. The warm glow of the red candles enveloped us. How could one squander such a spring night? Life after marriage unfolded with far more joy than I had envisioned. The barbarians had already submitted their surrender by the 10th month, and Ling Anping had been promoted to the esteemed rank of General Mingwei, a prominent figure in the military. He finally had the leisure to accompany me in playing polo and tossing the pot. Each time I encountered Zhao Yuan, I would see the veiled woman standing beside him. I could distinctly feel her gaze, but paid it no mind. What mattered to me were the points scored in polo and the number of pots thrown. I was concerned only with my own happiness and the joy of my husband. At last, Zhao Yuan extended an invitation to Ling Anping. He was uneasy about leaving me alone at home and insisted on taking me along. I made a point to adorn myself extravagantly, more so than ever before. The dishes at the Gathering Fragrance Pavilion were the finest in the capital, and today I savored them with particular delight. Had Su Fengwan seated across from me appeared any more discontented, I would have relished my meal even more. Once Zhao Yuan and Ling Anping were dismissed, Su Fengwan removed her veil and glared at me fiercely. Su Mei, I advise you to be more restrained. You are currently bearing my identity. I stuffed a piece of soy-braised pork into my mouth and cast a glance at Su Fengwan. If she hadn't mentioned it, I might have forgotten my name was originally Su Mei. Wiping my mouth, I met her gaze directly. We rarely confronted one another so openly, without any adornments. In the past, she had been unwilling. Now, she was unable. Su Fengwan's complexion was sallow, and she appeared unwell, suggesting that her recent days had not been particularly favorable. Seeing her in such a state brought me immense satisfaction. I see no reason to restrain my affection for my husband. You shameless wretch, truly a lowly maid, devoid of dignity. Su Fengwan seethed, spewing a torrent of invective. I regarded her with a calm demeanor as she grew increasingly frantic, my heart brimming with delight. She was merely experiencing discomfort, while I wished for her to endure every hardship I had previously faced. The door to the private room swung open, and Su Fengwan hurriedly donned her veil. I looked at her and smiled gently. Now it was she who could only exist beneath the veil. Ling Anping approached to take my hand, preparing to leave, but Zhao Yuan obstructed him. General Ling, a wise man knows when to be prudent. Ling Anping brusquely pushed him aside. Apologies, my vision may be impaired, but my heart is not blind. Zhao Zhen is like a brother to me. I cannot bring myself to harm a brother. With that, he turned away handsomely, not forgetting to retrieve the candy I had purchased earlier in the market. On our way home, he squeezed my hand and quietly asked, "Are you not cold, Xiang?" Cold Fragrance was the name my mother had given me, yet no one had ever cared to remember it. I shook my head, smiling brightly. With my husband by my side, Cold Fragrance has never feared the chill. His face lit up with satisfaction as he hummed a little tune while we made our way home. As expected, on the third day, we were summoned to the palace. Zhao Yuan sought to implicate Ling Anping in the alleged conspiracy against the former crown prince, Zhao Zhen, and as his wife, I was required to accompany him. I laughed heartily in the carriage. Su Fengwan surely had no inkling. She believed she had meticulously crafted the perfect trap. In reality, she was merely a pawn within the scheme. In the grand hall, Ling Onping, having discarded his armor, held my hand as we slowly approached the center.
Zhao Yuan,
Clad in a dragon robe, glared at Ling Onping with malevolence, while a veiled woman stood nearby. Ling Onping smiled broadly and bowed. I apologize for keeping His Highness the Crown Prince waiting. I followed suit, slightly inclining my head. Ling Onping, you stand accused of attempting to murder the former Crown Prince at the encampment. What is your intent? Zhao Yuan's voice echoed throughout the hall, clear for all to hear. Ling Onping gazed steadily at Zhao Yuan and slowly replied, I was in the 10th month. What energy would I have to plot against the former Crown Prince? What reason do I have to kill the former Crown Prince? Zhao Yuan turned his gaze towards me, his tone teasing. Naturally, it is because you fear that the Crown Prince will snatch away your beloved. No sooner had he spoken than a derisive laugh echoed from the entrance of the hall. And the former Crown Prince Zhao Zhen strode in with an air of confidence. Zhao Yuan was momentarily taken aback. For Zhao Zhen ought to have been confined to his residence at this time. Zhao Zhen approached the emperor with a steady bow before standing beside me and Ling Onping. The arrows used by the assassin on that day were indeed ordinary, but the assassin did not anticipate that Miss Su would be hunting with me. And in a moment of desperation, he resorted to the arrows from his own quiver. Zhao Yuan froze for a moment, then relaxed. I surveyed the surroundings, maintaining a composed demeanor, revealing not a trace of emotion. Zhao Zhen paused before continuing. These arrows from the quiver possess a peculiar design, featuring not just simple tips but 2 curved barbs. Anyone struck by them would surely extract them with flesh and blood, leaving behind wounds that are difficult to heal. Ling Onping knelt before the emperor, stating, My wife's 2 wounds indeed exhibit such characteristics. I glanced at the veiled woman. Calmly offering a bow, the commoner is willing to allow the physician to examine. After a considerable wait, a voice from above finally declared, Approved. The developments unfolded far more smoothly than I had anticipated. After the physician examined the wounds, she reported the truth to the emperor, confirming that only Zhao Yuan's quiver was equipped with such arrows. Moreover, the evidence did not end there. The bribes given to officials, the embezzled disaster relief funds, and the collusion with officials for nefarious purposes were all meticulously presented by Zhao Zhen. Zhao Yuan, with his wolfish ambition, had audaciously placed the assassination of the emperor on the agenda. This was, in essence, a trap set by Zhao Zhen and the emperor, a scheme to cleanse the court, eradicate the malignant tumors, and root out the dangers. The Su family censor was, of course, implicated as well. I feigned a few words of concern, managing to secure his life. Yet the emperor, with a wave of his hand, dispatched him to the border as a governor, to depart next month. My keen eyes easily caught sight of Su Fengwan's trembling form. She was desperately suppressing her emotions. I stood beside Ling Onping, my expression untroubled. I could hardly fathom how Su Fengwan, now burdened as the daughter of a convicted traitor, felt at this moment. Perhaps my heart was narrow, for I found a peculiar delight in her distress. I also understood that she would not simply let this matter rest. After resting at home for a few days, I learned that Zhao Zhen had again been bestowed the title of Crown Prince. Ling Onping, while drawing my eyebrows, remarked, This is only fitting. Among the princes, Zhao Yuan is not the only one with ambition. However, this time, Zhao Zhen has pulled out too many who have done nothing but drain the lifeblood of the people. It would be inappropriate not to make him Crown Prince. I glanced at him, his features spirited and his demeanor vibrant, truly a young man full of vigor. Do you understand court politics? You underestimate your husband too much, he retorted lightly, reaching out to caress my cheek, repeatedly rubbing the scar on my profile. Does it still hurt? I shook my head. After such a long time, the scar had faded to a mere line. How could it still ache? He paused, then pulled out a handkerchief to confirm if it was from my hand. It was indeed the handkerchief I had embroidered for Su Fengwan back in the day, the stitching still showing signs of my youthful clumsiness, and it bore faint traces of blood. Evidently something he had carried with him to battle. Seeing me in a daze, Ling Onping happily tucked the handkerchief into his clothing, muttering that Zhao Zhen had not deceived him. I smiled brightly. Some things need not be explicitly articulated. Half a month later, the Empress invited me to the palace for a discussion. I calculated the days, realizing that the time for Su's departure from the city was drawing near. Su Fengwan could hardly wait. Ling Anping cautiously helped me into the carriage, his face full of concern. I smiled at him, counting off the treats I desired: dragon whisker candy, snow cream, date cake, and the newly released roast suckling pig from the Jixiang Pavilion. I wanted them all. Only then did he crack a smile, urging me to return home in time for dinner. I patted his hand, signaling him not to worry excessively. In contrast to Ling Anping, I felt calmer, even harboring a hint of excitement. He might not understand how a noble lady in the capital should conduct herself, but I was well aware. I not only understood the ways of noble women in the capital, but also knew what kind of general's wife the royal family needed, what kind of Su family eldest daughter was required. The vibrant Wanjing garden in the palace was now abloom with flowers, and seated beside the empress was Su Fengwan, without any veil to conceal her. I first approached and performed a proper bow, then sat down with poise. I ensured that every movement was both correct and natural, such that even the strictest of instructors could find no fault. The empress glanced at me, then at Su Fengwan seated beside her, her eyes flickering with curiosity, before finally resting her hand on a bouquet before her. These roses and peonies are quite similar. At times, even I cannot tell them apart. Su Fengwan clearly did not comprehend the empress's words. Your Majesty, flowers can be admired on another day. But this lowly maid took my place during my wedding and locked me away. My parents can testify to this. This is a crime against the crown, and she must not be let off easily. I covered my rising smile with a handkerchief. The difference between a rose and a peony is evident to discerning eyes. Most importantly, whether rose or peony, neither should delude themselves into aspiring to be a peony. The empress raised her gaze, appearing pleasantly surprised, but then quickly concealed her expression. What this young lady has said, do you have anything to counter? The empress looked at me, seemingly testing. I remained unhurried, speaking gently. Just because you bear a face resembling mine, do you presume yourself to be the general's wife? Truly, you are an ignorant servant, speaking such words that offend your ears. Su Fengwan was indignant, slapping her hand on the table and summoning servants to bring up Mother Mo. The empress, with a gentle demeanor, inquired of Mother Mo, asking her to identify the true eldest daughter of the Su family between me and Su Fengwan. Mother Mo knelt on the ground, pointing her finger at me. Before I could speak, Su Fengwan urgently interjected, "Do not forget the one from the western suburbs." I raised my gaze, fixing my eyes on Su Fengwan. She had always believed that I merely bore a coincidental resemblance to her, unaware that my mother was the first wife of the Su family patriarch, and that the eldest lady had conspired against my mother on the day I was born, falsely accusing her of infidelity and claiming that the child in her womb was a bastard. Fortunately, I was fated to survive. Mother Mo, who had been my mother's close maid, exchanged me for a stillborn child born to a farmer's wife in the village shortly after my birth, thus saving my life. On the day the eldest lady found me in the maid's quarters, she sent someone to forcibly cut out Mother Mo's tongue. Yet, Mother Mo, having no children or grandchildren, had only one person she cared for, my mother. Mother Mo furrowed her brow, about to speak again when another figure entered Wanjing garden. It was none other than Crown Prince Zhaozhen. What western suburb are we discussing? What interesting matters are at hand? Upon seeing the Crown Prince, the Empress recounted the recent events. As soon as he finished listening, he burst into hearty laughter. What could be difficult about this? Ling Anping told me that during the engagement, he secretly met with the Su family's young lady, bringing along candy and a plum blossom. However, he inadvertently caused her to be disfigured. As soon as Zhao Zhen's words fell, Su Fengwan's expression changed dramatically, as if suddenly recalling something, and pointed at me, saying, "How could that be?" The scar on her face was clearly made by me. So from that time, you two were already entangled. One cannot say it like that. Zhao Zhen chuckled. That is simply mutual affection. Do you think Ling Anping fights so fiercely on the battlefield for no reason? It is not merely for the sake of earning a name to marry a wife. The Empress, seated in the center, cast her gaze around, lost in her thoughts. Zhao Zhen took a sip of tea before continuing. Moreover, Miss Su is also the one who saved my life. On the day she escorted me back to the camp, I indeed noticed a scar on the left side of her cheek. The Empress turned her gaze toward me, and I gently wiped the makeup from my face with a handkerchief, revealing the faint scar. The implications were painfully clear. Su Fengwan suddenly realized the gravity of her situation and immediately knelt before the Empress, the Crown Prince, and myself, bowing in submission. The Empress and the Crown Prince remained unmoved, and in desperation, she crawled to my feet, pleading, "I will no longer strike you, nor will I scold you. Let us exchange our statuses, and I shall grant you anything you desire." I smiled softly, lifting her chin with my fingertip. What audacity! To beg for mercy, like a lowly maid. Drag her away, give her 50 strokes. Su Fengwan's eyes widened in disbelief, as if she could scarcely fathom that I had uttered such words. Leaning close to her ear, I inquired, "I wonder, is the spawn of King Qing still nestled within your womb?" Her screams gradually faded into silence under the relentless blows. The Empress, feigning a headache, dismissed us. I stood, adjusted my garments, and maintained a serene expression, almost indistinguishable from my earlier demeanor. I was acutely aware that neither the Empress, nor the Crown Prince, nor any member of the royal family desired Su Fengwan. They sought a general's wife who was decorous, composed, and eternally loyal to them. Should this general's wife possess any leverage over them, it would be even more advantageous. As for the truth, did it truly matter? Regrettably, Su Fengwan failed to grasp this truth. She believed that the blood coursing through her veins could secure her salvation. By the time I returned home, night had enveloped the surroundings, and the house was ablaze with light. Ling Anping awaited at the entrance, and upon seeing my carriage return, he hurried forward to greet me. Carefully assisting me down, he whispered in my ear, "The individuals sent by the Crown Prince have already been arranged in the West Wing. I just dispatched a physician there." I paused momentarily, then quickly comprehended whom he referred to. Steadying my steps, I hastened toward the West Wing upon entering the residence, where I beheld a frail and emaciated figure, my mother. She was propped up, gazing intently at me, and I collapsed into her embrace, tears streaming unabated. How wonderful it was! Not only had I escaped the confines of my cage, but I could also behold my mother once more. Ling Anping stood awkwardly at a distance, ultimately bringing over a dining table upon which a golden roast pig was prominently displayed. I broke into a smile through my tears. The hardships I had endured were not in vain. The ensuing 6 months were the most joyous period of my life. I could engage in any pursuits I had longed for, making friends, admiring flowers, savoring tea. All these once illusory desires had now materialized before me. Alas, fate is often unkind. The previously surrendered tribes suddenly turned hostile, launching surprise attacks on several cities and plundering their granaries. Ling Anping received an edict from the palace in the morning and was to hastily lead troops to the frontier the following day. I rushed to the palace to beseech the Empress for permission to accompany the troops, which was graciously granted. Ling Anping, unusually in high spirits, ignored me for several days. Even during our march, our encounters few and far between. However, I held no concern. My sole motivation to insist on going to the front lines was the fact that the first location attacked by the tribes was the county where Su's family patriarch had taken office 6 months prior. My worry was not for their safety, but rather a firm belief that the Su family would not passively acquiesce to the emperor's arrangements. By the 10th day of the month, I learned my suspicions were not unfounded. The place where Su's patriarch was stationed, Yonglong County, was the closest to Shishua and had already fallen into ruin due to the tribe's incursions. The inhabitants were displaced, yet there was no sign of the Su family. After Su Fengwan had endured 50 strikes in the palace, her family had sent someone to escort her back, and within a week, several had set off for Yonglong County. I donned a riding outfit and sought out Ling Anping in his tent. His beard had grown considerably, and fatigue was etched in his eyes as he strained to study the terrain map laid out before him. I shared my discoveries, and Ling Anping's brow relaxed momentarily before his expression hardened with resolve. I had been puzzled as to how these savages could bypass the most fortified locations and directly target the granary. However, if someone intentionally leaked the city defense map, everything falls into place. I voiced my concerns regarding the defense map, prompting Ling Anping to summon his subordinates, dictating a letter to be sent out, and subsequently assembling all the generals for a strategic discussion. The other generals hesitated to speak in my presence beside Ling Anping, who ignored them and meticulously orchestrated the plan. In the days that followed, I endeavored to soothe the populace within the city, while Ling Anping arranged defenses in the surrounding areas. The tribes boasted an army of nearly 100,000, while we possessed a mere 30,000, an overwhelming disparity. Moreover, it was predicted that the tribes, armed with the defense map, would return to flatten our city and formally declare war in a matter of days. Ling Anping was not one to remain idle. He allocated 30% of his forces to execute a flanking maneuver. As night fell, I pressed a kiss to his eye and merely whispered, "No regrets." He gently embraced me before releasing his hold and mounting his horse. I watched his silhouette vanish into the darkness, taking a deep breath before returning to the city. At this juncture, I felt a profound sense of contentment with all I had gained. Anything beyond this was merely a bonus. 2 days later, at dawn, a woman rode up to the city gate and began to pound upon it. She cried out, proclaiming herself to be the wife of General Mingwei, urging the guards to open the gate. Before I could reach the battlements, I heard her exclaiming, "Open the gate. I am the wife of General Mingwei. The general is trapped, and we must rush to his aid." I momentarily hesitated before hastening to the battlements to assess the situation below. Dressed in riding attire and donning a suit of armor left by Ling Anping, I peered down to see Su Fengwan clad in white, flecked with traces of blood, desperately pounding on the gate. One of the guards stepped forward to inquire, "What proof do you have to substantiate your claim as the general's wife?" Su Fengwan promptly drew a sword from her side and raised it high, declaring, "This is General Mingwei's sword. You must recognize it. The general is currently trapped 5 miles from here in the mountains. Hasten to open the gate and save him." I scrutinized the sword, frowning slightly. It was indeed Ling Anping's sword, but her presence indicated that the location she spoke of was undoubtedly a trap. I stepped forward, proclaiming loudly, "You claim to be the wife of General Mingwei? Then look closely and see who I am." Su Fengwan's momentary lapse of composure quickly transformed into defiance as she retorted, "You, a lowly maid, dare to impersonate the wife of General Mingwei. Your presence in the city is to bolster the morale of the troops, not to masquerade as me." I let out a cold laugh. "It has been a long time. I never expected you could grow so clever. General Mingwei and I share a profound love, naturally. I must always be by his side. Now that he is in peril, do not waste time." The guards exchanged glances, a hint of hesitation evident. I stood atop the high wall, offering no further words. Su Fengwan continued to plead. "He entrusted me with the tokens of our past to ensure my escape. Yet you blind fools would have him perish in vain." As she spoke, she produced a handkerchief from her garments, one that I had personally embroidered with snow plum blossoms. The general defending the city had fought numerous battles against Ling Anping and immediately recognized the handkerchief that Ling Anping had long cherished. Even standing beside me, his grip on his sword tightened. I smirked slightly, seized the bow and arrows from a nearby soldier, and shot an arrow straight through her right arm. She cried out in pain, disbelief etched on her face as she looked at me. "This is the archery taught to me by my husband. How precise do you think it is? Surely, it hurts far more than the wound you inflicted upon yourself?" Before Su Fengwan could fully comprehend the situation, I produced the military token from my sleeve. "The military token is here. All listen to my command." This was handed to me by Ling Anping before he left, with but one instruction: wait for reinforcements and guard the city gate. Upon seeing the order, everyone around me knelt down. Even the defending general half-kneeled beside me. "Defend the city gate to the last, not retreating an inch." "Understood." Su Fengwan, sensing the dire situation below the city walls, immediately mounted her horse and sought to flee. I drew my bow and aimed at her calf, releasing an arrow that nearly caused her to fall from her mount. Yet she gritted her teeth and continued to ride back. Once Su Fengwan departed, the atmosphere within the city turned grave. Regardless of the truth in her words, the absence of news regarding Ling Anping was all too real. As afternoon approached, the sun set ablaze on the horizon, and the vast, tumultuous army of the barbarians drew near, resembling an endless dark cloud poised to unleash a tempest. Days prior, I had organized the evacuation of civilians from the city. Now, aside from the officials and soldiers, only a handful of landlords and determined citizens remained. Everyone's nerves had been taut throughout the day, and now they were exceptionally focused. The barbarian army halted about 3 miles from the city gates. A prison cart was slowly pushed forward from the rear. I tightened my grip on the bow, fixating on the person within the cart. The barbarian general pulled the captive out, accompanied by jeers from those around. It was none other than Su Fengwan. The general stood beneath the city gate, mocking her, tearing her clothes into disarray, repeatedly calling her the wife of General Mingwei. Su Fengwan must have been deceived on both ends. I found it amusing and climbed the city tower, drawing my bow to shoot 3 arrows at the barbarian general. He deflected the first 2 aimed at his head and chest, but the last one struck deep into his calf. Removing my helmet, I laughed loudly. If she is truly the wife of General Mingwei, then who am I? A blind fool, deceived by a counterfeit. How utterly laughable. Upon realizing he had been fooled, the barbarian general bound Su Fengwan to his horse and dragged her away, leaving her bloodied and mangled. I stood atop the city wall, coldly observing. Not a soul among us felt pity for her. For one who colludes with the enemy and betrays the nation, 1,000 cuts would be too lenient. The following 2 days were not easy for us. Despite the insults exchanged between the 2 sides, the disparity in strength was insurmountable, leading to a dire situation by the 3rd day where supplies ran critically low. Blood stained the city walls, and devastation lay both inside and outside the city. Leaning against the frigid wall, I gazed up at the stars, knowing that dying on the battlefield was not the ending I had hoped for. Yet, in the past half-month, I had witnessed far too much. A general dying for the people is not disgraceful, it is glorious. In the dead of night, word arrived from the general defending the city that Zhao Zhen, leading 100,000 troops, was racing from the capital to our aid and would arrive within 10 miles by morning. However, there was still no news of Ling Anping, as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. I could not fathom why my dry eyes could not shed a single tear. All I knew was that he had asked me to defend the city before he left. Now the city had been held. Ling Anping, where are you? Zhao Zhen looked at me, raised his hand, and ultimately settled for a comforting pat on my shoulder. I knelt, raising the military token high, and Zhao Zhen sighed deeply before taking the token belonging to Ling Anping from my grasp. The following day's battle proved to be auspicious. The barbarians had not anticipated our reinforcements arriving so swiftly, and the land outside the city was stained red with the blood of 20,000. On the 3rd day, the barbarians suffered a crushing defeat, with Zhao Zhen leading the troops from the front, while a sudden cavalry charge emerged from the enemy's left flank, striking like a sword into the enemy's belly. Their formation collapsed, leading to utter rout and chaos. The moment I caught sight of Ling Anping, tears blurred my vision. I had thought that after such a long time, I would no longer be able to cry, yet in that instant, my heart was overwhelmed with emotion. Ling Anping, accompanied by 9,000 men, had circled behind the enemy but was discovered by their scouts, forcing him to feign a retreat and abandon his armor for a time, which explained why Su Fengwan possessed Ling Anping's sword. Yet, unexpectedly, they became lost and inadvertently stumbled into the main tent of the barbarians. Ling Anping promptly ordered an assault to capture their commander, conveniently retrieving the Su couple who had colluded with the enemy. Crown Prince Zhao Zhen raised his hand and beheaded the barbarian commander before sending the Su couple back to the capital. This turmoil was finally drawing to a close. Upon returning to the capital, the emperor conferred upon me the title of Princess of Liang and granted me the right to accompany my husband into battle. I knelt upright within the palace, where the emperor inquired if I desired any further rewards. Bowing deeply, I replied, "The Su family colluded with the enemy and betrayed the nation, drawing the disdain of all. I too bear shame in the Su surname. I beseech your majesty for compassion and a new name." The hall fell silent for a long while before the emperor finally uttered a single word: "Good." From that day forth, Su Fengwan would cease to exist, along with Su Mei. Only Princess Liang Zhao Lingxiang would remain. Zhao Zhen, exclaiming as an elder brother, insisted on arranging a new wedding for me and Ling Anping. The empress also remarked that a royal princess should not have a shabby ceremony. 3 months later, I and Ling Anping held another wedding. Standing together on the platform outside the palace, as the sun gradually rose, warm rays enveloped my face. Lingxiang, unafraid of the cold, had finally emerged as a beauty. Epilogue. Ling Anping. Upon my return from the 10th month, the emperor appointed me as general of Huaihua and betrothed me to the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Justice, Su Fengwan. When Zhao Zhen learned of this, he laughed so hard he could scarcely hold his cup. He remarked that this legitimate daughter was quite ambitious, having drawn his attention through various means since she was 13. He also mentioned that she had a formidable maid who often helped her navigate perilous situations. I was indifferent, My parents had perished in battle when I was 7, and the emperor, seeing my plight, took me into the palace to grow up alongside Zhaozhen. Nonetheless, having a wife is undoubtedly a good thing. Before heading back to the 10th month, I climbed over the wall of the Minister of Justice's courtyard, intending to meet my future bride. It would not do to visit empty-handed, so I purchased some sweet candies that girls love to carry in my pocket. Avoiding the guards within the courtyard, I easily found the legitimate daughter's quarters. To be frank, my actions were rather akin to that of a rogue. As I climbed over the wall, I spotted a beautiful young woman kneeling in the snow. Her face was exquisite, though marred by a scar that traced her profile, red blood stark against the white of winter. She startled upon seeing me, her eyes widening in surprise. I gestured for her to remain silent and tossed her a piece of candy. Suddenly, a loud shout erupted from within the house, and the young woman lowered her head, muttering, "I am Su Fengwan's most wretched maid." Hearing this took me aback, and I then understood what had transpired. In a fit of anger, I jumped down from the wall. The young woman shook her head timidly, and I halted at the door. Entering now would benefit neither of us, and could even backfire. I handed the candy to the young woman still kneeling in the snow. Zhaozhen was right. The Minister of Justice's legitimate daughter was not necessarily virtuous. A significant event unfolded in the capital while I was at Bianshua. Zhaozhen was ambushed at the hunting ground, only to be rescued by the legitimate daughter of the Su family. When I first heard of this event, I was taken aback. This young lady possesses remarkable skill. However, a letter from Zhaozhen compelled me to return in haste. He mentioned that the woman who saved him bore a scar on her face. Countless thoughts raced through my mind, but upon seeing Su Fengwan, all doubts were extinguished. It was not her. Her demeanor, gestures, and physique were all distinctly different, save for that singular aspect of her countenance. Yet, Su Fengwan's complexion was as delicate as porcelain, devoid of any blemish. I found myself in a daze, drowning my sorrows in a ceaseless flow of wine. Was it possible that everything I had witnessed was merely a dream? Zhaozhen, clutching a wine jug, visited me, asserting that he distinctly remembered the scar on the face of the woman who rescued him. Clearly, it was not Su Fengwan who had come to his aid. That very night, I scoured the Su estate inside and out, ultimately discovering her in a humble woodshed. She appeared frail, and the wounds on her arms and legs were poorly treated. My heart ached for her. Yet I was at a loss for words and could only assist in tending to her injuries. Upon seeing the wounds, I couldn't help but chuckle. It seemed Zhao Yuan had not anticipated that the arrows he loosed would leave such discernible marks. I relayed this information to Zhaozhen, who promptly set about investigating, soon uncovering Zhao Yuan's nefarious ambitions. To navigate this perilous game, many matters remained unspoken. The woman's name was Su Mei, a moniker not particularly melodious, yet fitting for her. I discreetly sent her several gifts, including a plum blossom hairpin, hoping she would grasp the sentiments behind my gestures. When Zhaozhen accompanied me to Shuashu, he produced a handkerchief from his pocket, embroidered with a branch of plum blossoms. He remarked that this handkerchief was likely crafted by her hand. Despite my hesitations, I accepted it from him. To ensure her safety, I required further military exploits. At last, clutching that handkerchief, I braved numerous life-and-death trials. Upon returning from Shuashu, Zhaozhen had already made significant progress in his strategic game. He informed me that it was highly probable I would wed the woman named Su Mei. I was elated, unable to sleep for several days, while Zhaozhen maintained an austere countenance. I understood that this game had escalated significantly, yet I was unconcerned. Should calamity befall me, I would wager all my military achievements. I refused to believe that I could not rescue a mere maid. She proved to be more astute than I had imagined, never once questioning anything, deftly evading scrutiny time and again. That day in Wanjinyuan, she portrayed the wife of General Mingwei with remarkable composure and skill. I realized that from that moment forth, she belonged to me, be she called Su Fengwan or Su Mei. When we headed to Shuashu, she insisted on accompanying me. Even when I expressed my annoyance, she stood her ground. Yet, when she articulated the crisis regarding the city's defenses, I once again re-evaluated the woman before me. Her intellect encompassed far more than the trifles of the inner court. I penned a letter to Zhaozhen, beseeching him to request the emperor to dispatch troops for support. At the conclusion, I included a divorce decree, informing Zhao Zhen that should I perish, he must look after her. I had thought I would never see her again. But there she stood atop the city wall, drawing her bow with the ferocity of a seasoned general. I smiled. Indeed, she too was called Lung Xiang. How could she possibly falter in the face of frost? She would forever bloom at the highest boughs. My Zhao Lingxiang. Epilogue. Zhao Zhen mused that the Su family's legitimate daughter was a poor actress. How could someone of her coarse appearance embroider such exquisite plum blossoms? Nevertheless, I accepted it, for I discerned the maid standing beside her. Her eyes bore a striking resemblance to Su Fengwan's. I caught a whiff of a hidden truth. However, during my investigations, my father discovered my findings. He glanced over the materials I had gathered before dismissively tossing them aside. The following day, my father arranged a marriage between Ling Anping and the Su family's legitimate daughter. The empress informed me that the royal family had no need for the daughter of a grand scholar as a consort. A person with excessive power may easily spiral into chaos. Ling Anping traveled to Shuashu, while that Su family daughter brazenly appeared in various locales. Yet, I could always distinguish between her and the maid named Su Mei. At the hunting ground, I watched Su Fengwan transform before my eyes. Intrigued, I invited her to hunt with us. Her horsemanship and archery were indeed commendable, and her adherence to etiquette was impeccable, embodying the essence of a true Su family daughter. Little did I anticipate that someone would attempt to harm me at the hunting ground. I was clad in golden silk armor, yet she was not. Though injured more severely than I, she persevered. I leaned gently against her back, gazing at her profile, where a scar marked her left cheek. It struck me as amusing that the Su family would so mistreat even a mere maid. I shared this with Ling Anping, who promptly returned in a hurry. I had presumed he came to see me, yet he turned and headed straight for the Su estate. Alas, he was blinded by his infatuation. Su Fengwan cast him aside, leaving him despondent for quite some time. I took a wine jug to seek him out, offering words of comfort. To be frank, after my wounds healed, I visited the Su estate several times. Each visit, witnessing Su Fengwan's performance, was a source of amusement. However, Ling Anping seemed to have stumbled upon something significant, rushing back to the Su estate that very night. The following day, he informed me that the arrow wounds on Su Fengwan's maid could only have been inflicted by Zhao Yuan's arrows. I raised an eyebrow, surprised he had noticed Su Mei. Everything that followed unfolded logically. I presented my findings to my father, who scrutinized the details for quite some time before slowly inquiring, "Are you so enamored with this woman?" I was at a loss for how to respond, for I was uncertain whether it could be called affection. My father subtly hinted to Zhao Yuan that securing the support of the grand scholar could pave the way to becoming the crown prince. That fool Zhao Yuan was truly well suited for Su Fengwan. Yet, I had not anticipated their entanglement. The empress advised me that ambition could be beneficial. However, ambition without foresight could lead to one's demise. Indeed, as the wedding approached, Su Fengwan unexpectedly found herself with child. The only one who could take her place was a singular person. I struggled to articulate the nature of my feelings. There was a heaviness in my heart. This game I had orchestrated was monumental, with a singular aim, to eradicate those who harbored ulterior motives. The couple, Ling Anping and his wife, collaborated seamlessly. That woman named Su Fengwan would likely never see the light of day again. Days later, I encountered Su Fengwan once more in Wanjinyuan. I dispatched someone to rescue a woman from the western outskirts, bringing her into Wanjinyuan to extricate her from peril. I did not speak falsehoods. Every word was sincere. Yet, I still faced punishment from the empress, forced to kneel in Wanjinyuan for a considerable duration. A monarch must never reveal his preferences. She accompanied Ling Anping to Shuashu. I could not fathom why a frail woman would venture to Shuashu. Before long, I received a letter from Ling Anping. Aside from detailing the situation in Shuashu, it contained a divorce decree. He stated that should he perish, I was to look after her. This letter had been opened by someone, yet I remained kneeling in the great hall. My father questioned me about my motives. I replied, for the citizens of Shuashu and the 30,000 soldiers. I knelt in the hall for an entire night. The next day, my father bestowed upon me an army of 100,000, and I set off for Shuashu without delay. In Shuashu, I witnessed scenes reminiscent of hell. Yet, she remained composed, her resolve unlike anything I had ever seen. The moment I laid eyes on her, I yearned to caress her silky hair, but in the end, I could only pat her shoulder. As a ruler, I nearly lost my composure. Upon returning to court, I was unaware of what my father had discussed with her. She was officially recognized under the title of the consort, Bajoming Princess Li Yang, Cao Leng Xiang. Thus, it was well. Even though I have assumed a different identity, I can still protect her openly and without reservation. This concludes the narrative. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing and liking to show your support. Until we meet again in the next story.